Hello, my pretties. It's Nerdy Witch here, and we are about to begin the asylum walkthrough. However, I was not allowed to record any video. I was only allowed to take photos. So it's going to be a photo slideshow. Yay! But it's not a Nerdy Witch video if I don't add the personal touch. So to begin this video, I first want to say thank you to the people that constantly comment and talk to me. I appreciate it. I think Yin's found out that I have my own kind of battle with my own inner demons from my first wish haul back from when Evelyn was born. I suffered very heavily from postpartum depression because I am diagnosed bipolar. So I have been in the modern mental health system trying to exorcise the demons, so to speak. So this video is very near and dear and very personal to me. So I am approaching this topic from a place of love and a little bit of experience. So it's one of these. Also, I'm not particularly psychic. It's just not a gift bestowed upon me by the universe. However, I'm highly empathic. I am incredibly sensitive to emotion, especially residual emotion. I can cry with somebody who's standing right in front of me. I can be mad. I can sense things that their stoic face is just not saying. I read emotion so well. I'll get more into that at the end of the video, but this was a highly emotional experience for me because of the history of this lunatic asylum. That being said, I won't bore you with all the mushy bits until the end, so that way history buffs and ghost hunters alike, you can just get right down to the nitty-gritty right now. So it is now called the Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and my husband and I spotted it on a billboard on our way down to North Carolina. And we decided, since it was so close to Pittsburgh, that we would hit it on the way back with both kids. I drug a baby through a lunatic asylum, probably because I'm crazy. So I bought this in the gift shop, because we all know I am a sucker for novelty. It is called Lunatic: The Rise and Fall of an American Asylum by Edward S. Gleason. There you go. It's a small book. In fact, I feel like this could be a 400-page novel very easily. It's only 92 pages with pictures, very concisely written. So if you don't have a hyper attention span, this is a great book for you. Mine was bought in the gift shop, so it has a signature from the author, and it was written in 2014, so it is pretty recent. The hospital was acquired in 2007, and all of the money from the tours, ghost hunting, special events go back into the asylum. So after they pop the employees, like almost 100% of the profits, I want to say 100%, might be 80%, go back into renovating the asylum. So it's kind of like dressing the scene. As you're walking through, they have period pieces. There's not a bunch of the original furniture because it was abandoned, and there was a lot of destruction, mold. I believe there was a fire in one of the buildings at one point. So the daughter of the guy who owns it travels to auctions and buys period pieces to recreate the rooms based on the vintage photography. So it is all period accurate. And in some places, there's just enough props to make it creepy. There are a couple of hallways and rooms where there's a dilapidated bed in it or just a wheelchair. And it's not gruesome, but when you wrap your mind and try to actualize around the facts, it's actually horrifying. And then you have this visual, so you can really kind of put yourself in there if you have an overactive imagination, such as myself. So let's get into the facts. I will be taking some highlighted notes from this book and things that I learned on the tour. I'm not going to read it verbatim because I don't want to insult this author. I want you to read the book if you are interested. This is only a 2-hour drive outside of Pittsburgh. I might have just repeated myself because I am oh so professional. I feel like that would be my solid first stab at merch. Let me know how you feel about that. Comment below. So we're gonna put my art historian skills to the test here, and I'm gonna summarize it. One of my favorite art history books is called Instant Art History. So it is the facts, but they are portrayed or emulated in such a way that it is funny. It is like talking to a teenager nowadays. It's put in slang, just these like to the point facts that you go, that's funny, but you're not wrong. So if my delivery is a little similar to that, that's kind of my approach to art history. I blame that book. I will put links to both in the comments below, along with a link to the Lunatic Asylum, to the history. So the building, the original building, there's several buildings that have been built and destroyed over the years, but the original main building that you drive up to, this giant archway, it kind of looks like the house on Haunted Hill. Maybe I'm dating myself about the movie, but it took several years to complete because of state funding or something. But it was built between 1858 and 1881. It was functional. It ran all the way until 1994. As I was walking through the place, my mind immediately went to American Horror Story Asylum, because that place was functional, I believe, in the series up until the 70s. Now, if you can imagine all that horror being carried into 1994, which is in a lot of our memories, because that's our generation. So again, very active imagination. Originally, looking at the 1700s, mental illness was relatively unknown. Insanity was completely not a thing. You were possessed, you were in league with the devil, you were a witch, and you start seeing things like witch trials, and there are some documented cases where the person might have not been a midwife or a neighbor dispute. They were mentally disabled. They either had a handicap or were prone to fits of mental breakdowns, and then were there and labeled a witch, hung, murdered, slogged. Use your imagination. It only got a little bit better moving into the 18th century. But there is something that happened towards the end of the 18th century, and I don't know if it's actually called this, but in my mind it's more of a modern renaissance because of the advancements in science and medicine. For me, I'm thinking of The Road to Wellness a little bit, where the guy is super obsessed with enemas as a thing for mental health. However, there's still some revenge of the mommy brain. Barbaric solutions to the problems of mental illness, and it's only now starting to get labeled. But the colonial populations at this time in America were starting to boom. So what do you do with these insane people? Somebody gets this bright idea, let's put them in with the criminals. Ta-da! No. Bad. That does not work. So around 1773, you start to see the first asylums being built because medicine is starting to say the criminal brain is not a mentally ill brain. There is a segregation there. But the solutions is not an elegant one. The beatings are still continuing. They're still restraining. There's a belief that insane people cannot feel hot and cold. They're living in their own filth. You're basically a glorified animal at that point. So fast forward to Thomas Story Kirkbride. He is the star of the chapter 1 of the beginning of the Lunatic Asylum for West Virginia. He was born in 1809, and growing up on this farm, he was considered too frail, too fragile, just, nope, no farming for me. So he decided he wanted to study medicine. So he started studying at the age of 18. And moving along, he tried to get a residency as a surgeon, but he wasn't accepted. I don't know that there's research to say why he wasn't accepted. So he was offered a post at a Quaker asylum near Philadelphia. They were a lot more progressive. The Quakers were more progressive at this time. They thought that these people were sick, that it was curable, that you could help people. So they created a more family-friendly atmosphere. There were no restraints. They would play games, mentally stimulate the patients, and it was incredibly more humane. However, it wasn't, again, complete antidote to the problem. So there's Kirkbride, who's got this amazing soft spot and compassion for people. And he was noted as being super attentive to these patients, and being recognized by his peers caused for him to be promoted. I believe he was a superintendent for a asylum, but he still felt that there were improvements to be made with the care. So he thought, let's start with the building. And since the building is the start of the slideshow, let's get started. This was the original hallway designed according to the Kirkbride plan. Fresh air and sunlight were considered essential to wellness, so they used bright colored paint and large windows with minimal bars to let it all in. No room was directly across from another, so that the light would be maximized, and so would the healing. Originally designed to hold 250 people, it would eventually come to hold over 2,400 at the time of its foreclosure. His design would eventually become the standard for several institutions in several different states. He wanted to make sure that each room, parlor, and bathroom would be comfortably furnished to help aid in the healing process. This is a recreation of one of the original patients' rooms from back in 1880s. This is where you can start to see varying levels of decay from when the building was abandoned for over a decade. At one time, this became a geriatric ward, so these doors were made to be more compatible with wheelchairs. And here is some original photographs from the era being put on display for the tour. Sadly, Kirkbride's plan would go out the window, and rooms would hold up to 6 to 8 patients at one time. As we step outside, we admire the Gothic revival style of the building. Originally, it was constructed by prison laborers, but they brought in Irish stone masons. The masons thought that these stones could scare away mental defects and became a quirky part of the exterior. Before we continue, I would like to give mad props to my husband, who managed to make a bottle and feed Evelyn on the go during the tour. The Civil War portion of the hospital is still used today for events such as drag queen shows, which I think is fabulous. Additional property for the asylum was purchased at the onset of the Civil War for expansion. In the early stages of construction, the asylum fell victim to part of the war. Asylum grounds became home for supplies and military warehouses. Here we see the stable. So this is the medical building, and my memory is failing me slightly because there were so many gory details on this part of the tour. It had the most dilapidation and actually is part of the reason why that there's a mold and slip waiver when you first sign into the hospital. All of the surgeries and a good portion of deaths happened in this building for an extended period of time. This is the ramp that they used to wheel the bodies out around back for when they died in surgery. A lot of the patients were vagrants of society and were not missed at this time. Stays in this building were short. You either walked out alive or you didn't. There was a break room also located right next to the surgery center and the morgue, so you could hear bone saws while you were nomming on a sandwich. Here you can see some of the caskets from the time along with the vintage photography. And up next is probably my absolute favorite room, the beauty salon and the barber, right next to all of that blood and surgery and gross, gory parts. So, yay! Eventually, this building would also be repurposed as a geriatric ward. Big surprise. Another highlight of the tour is this tree, which is over 100 years old. So it saw the rise and fall of the lunatic asylum. Here we see the maximum security facility that held the world's most dangerous criminals at the time. However, that was a separate tour with a separate fee, which I plan on paying for. But needless to say, it didn't work so well in the security aspects. Property housed many different buildings that were built up and ripped apart over and over again. Here are the military trucks. I think they use these for the zombie hunts during Halloween. I also plan on doing that because that's freaking cool. Did I mention the entire property, including its surrounding cemeteries, are 666 acres? Here was where the dining hall used to be located. It had its own bakery and butchery. The entire property was designed to be entirely self-sustaining, including natural gas, coal. It had its own greenhouse, but like I said earlier, the buildings got ripped apart for God knows what reason. This is what you see when you come back in through those doors. Coming through these doors ended the very basic tour and gave you access to a mini museum, the gift shop, and some additional information on the area. However, we paid extra money, so we got to go up the stairs and into 3 more floors of awesomeness. I have a thing about archways and doorways where I find that they're significant because they show a passage into another space. And I found this particular set of doors that gave me the heebie-jeebies. After the fact, I found out that it is part of the haunted tour where you can ghost hunt during the day. Moving on to the doctor's quarters and offices, we're going to see the apothecary here with all of its bottles and medicine. I found them particularly adoring because there was chocolate-coated strychnine, arsenic tablets, and medicinal whiskey. We enter Dorothea Dick's office, which you can see here, and a view of the grounds and the nurses' quarters coming up through here. New this year was the renovated ballroom, which was a staple to the surrounding town. Not only did it entertain the patients, but it also was home to the high school prom. Can you imagine going to the lunatic asylum on prom night in the 80s? It was also the first working movie theater in the area. It was the only really large space in town, which actually has some of the fondest and most positive energy in the entire asylum. Logan was adamant about me capturing this quote on the wall. Succeeding came the violent men's and women's wards. This is the part of the tour where things began to get gruesome. Our tour guide was explaining to us that some of the women in the hospital would come in pregnant, and after they gave birth, the children would become wards of the state and be housed at the hospital as well. This makes me giggle so much because Evelyn was just happily talking and babbling away, and the tour guide could not believe how well behaved her and Logan were. Walter Jackson Freeman had been a forerunner in psychosurgery, but in the 50s, he used the hospital to perfect the ice pick lobotomy. It got shooed into general obscurity because it was eventually considered cruel. This laundry chute became a catalyst for an accidental suicide when a patient dropped down several stories when trying to escape. I'd like to take the time to mention that this hospital is not air conditioned. We were subjected to the heat of the summer. The seclusion chambers house the most violent and insane patients that could not be controlled. They were kept in complete seclusion and completely neglected by their caretakers. We're going to see a door here where a patient had literally banged it to pieces, and you can see the finger marks of him trying to escape due to hunger, insanity, I don't know. But your toilet was basically the hole in the ground there, and you were just left to rot. This is a room where a patient was murdered by two other patients. They had tried to string him up on the pipes there in the ceiling, and when that didn't work, they took the edge of a cot and stomped it into his brain until he died. This is my favorite part because this hallway was used by several police officers and emergency responders for a paintball fight. There was a bunch of press online of newspaper clippings at the time. It was after the hospital had been abandoned, so it was breaking and entering property violations, and the damage from the paintballs is currently permanent. The tour ended with the newly renovated VIP rooms that are located above the ballroom and show some of the entertainment and lounging spaces of the era. The best story was at the end of a patient that goes, "I can make it." And he jumped down all 4 stories through these stairs without a scratch or a broken bone. Let me show you some of the museum pieces that I found particularly interesting. And then it opens up to a giant homage to the power of art therapy. What I found particularly bothersome is that a lot of these pieces were dated in times that I have access to in my recent memory. They are contemporary. I can remember where I was in 1994, and then to see a drawing from a patient there just kind of hit me home. And because I've also used art therapy to help me with some of my ailments, I have a particular soft spot for this part. I wish I could have stayed longer, but the museum was starting to close, as well as the rest of the asylum, and everybody wanted out of there. But these masks are my favorite part of the art portion, and you can see them on Google Maps as part of the contributing photos. Welcome back, my pretties. So if you have made it this far into the video and you were that dedicated and you were hung on every word, I need you to comment snickerdoodles down below. That is how I know that you have watched every second of this video and not just 4 minutes here, 5 minutes there. I want to see how many people are actually engaging with the content that I'm making. I have decided, due to the length of this video, that I will make a part 2 to summarize my thoughts and experiences at the Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. So thank you for bearing with me. Please comment and subscribe. I will be doing a ghost hunt and movie night at the Dixmont coming up this Friday. So you can expect a video several days later from that of my experience there. So take care, and mommy brain. I completely spaced, and I don't even feel like we're shooting it at this point. You're just gonna have to learn to deal with it. This hopefully is one of my endearing qualities. That's it from me. Take care and bye, witches.